ain't going back. Not gonna buy into all that. Hey, hey, ain't gonna hide. Gonna let all the fears slide. Got Mother Nature is on my side. Got all of the loving.
All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome once again to the New Now. I am so delighted to have both Dr. Brent Davis and Sir Julian Rose with us today for the first time together. We're going to discuss community, sovereignty, land, liberty, and, how to be alive in beautiful ways. And let's take it away. Julian, hello. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Lorenzo. It's always a pleasure to be on the show.
And Brent, perhaps you can take us into, Flor Alive in your community. And the topic we're going to be discussing today is sovereignty on the land.
Yeah, I've prepared a little, I'll do a screen share and show this because it's just a little piece that people can read. And I think I might read it myself for those folks that are listening with just only audio. And then we can go into something that's more extemporaneous. The full life transformation process, we'll go to the website and take a look at that. But what's remarkable, and this is why Julian, it's so fun to have you here because you're exactly in a domain that one might not think of for a company that's producing products or substances from nature. But what it turns out, and which I'll show over time, is there is an amazing way I foresaw that the right individuals can show up for this community, and they actually can also work in the company. What a joy that would be, because when people are looking to leave the city, to bug out and get into the country and form a homestead, one of the big issues is how are we going to live? They either can be independently, sustained, they have separate, financially independent, or there are people that are wonderful individuals that are going, well, how can we make that move? And we hope that as Flor Alive grows, it will be able to sustain some of those people with employment. So that's this wonderful vision, because as the supply chain continues to break down, and as the unfolding of the plan that's been so carefully constructed takes place, we're going to have potentially very difficult situation with living conditions, and especially with employment. It could be, as it is now in the United States, wages that were $12, $14 an hour, now $18 or $20 an hour, and it just keeps rising so that it becomes unsustainable for a small company. Only the corporate giants and the Googles and the Microsofts, they can sustain those wages. So then it becomes even more important for us to have community that supports us, right where we live. So that's the hope anyway. All right, so here we are on the homepage, and I encourage people to go to floralive.com. There's a great deal of information there, but let me just take you to, this is a cute thing that really in one picture shows, as everyone knows, particularly the UK audience, the great Dr. Edward Bach, Bach, however it's pronounced. Certainly in Cornwall, I guess, is where his work was done. And the flowers from more than one company makes flower essences, but they're cut. And so this was a workshop attendee made this cute little diagram about 15 years ago, and I've kept it ever since. And in one picture that shows, there's a remarkable way that was patented in 2000, 2001, that flowers are extracted while they are living without cutting them. And I'll get into just a couple of the discussion of why that's so important. So the model of Flor Alive that has evolved over the years, and it started clinically, because I've been in practice since 1978 as a holistic integrative care doctor. And so when I had these discoveries at the turn of the millennium, I was able to take the newly extracted flower essences into clinic right away, and with advanced applied kinesiology, in which I'm trained, I was able to find what a substance would do that was an unknown entity. It was a new flower. And it wasn't taking information from anyone else's findings. These were all de novo. They were things that I experienced through the wonderful guidance that has come to me. And so what became clear is certainly not something that's foreign to people that do traumatology work, recovery from people who have undergone great trauma. We have to clear the trauma. At that point, we can enable receiving. And after that is in place, then we can maximize potential. So this is definitely an enormous form of self-help, but quite different from the weekend seminars and so on. All right. I jokingly say, you know, the guys are in their Ferraris and private jets telling you to become powerful and wealthy, but we really want to clear trauma, enable receiving before we do that, or we create wealthy, powerful monsters. So, of which we have a lot of in this era. So that's how that goes. You can go and look at this repair model more later, but that gives a little bit more explanation of that. When we this is showing the 8 categories that we believe are most commonly needed. Finding more love, being positive and happy, healing emotional trauma. That's what I said is so profoundly necessary. And we look at, for example, look at these flowers. They're Sir Julian, I think you must be tuned to this. I mean, there is such an enormous energy that can flow through flowers. And it turns out that when I wrote my book, The Floral Hand of God, Secret Healing Codes of Flowers Revealed, and that's available, by the way, on a website called thefloralhandofgod.com. And we actually, in recent interviews, many people have started looking at that book, and I tell them to please order it from there. Don't go to Amazon, because Amazon is selling defunct copies that have got broken spines and stuff. And so we redid it with a spiral that you can open flat, because you have these beautiful color plates of all the photos. And what's remarkable is that when I did my work with Dr. William Tiller as my science advisor and professor emeritus from Stanford, and there, thank you, hold it up again. Hold it up again.
I have my own copy I picked up from Brent directly a few weeks ago.
There you go. And so this was an attempt to, for the first time, look at the frequencies, the flower frequencies, to find out scientifically, because I am trained in science, to find out what on earth these things could be doing physically. So I turned to, I think, our greatest, the grandfather, the senior person that investigated the evolution of consciousness, who's also a physicist, longstanding at Stanford. And he was the most marvelous person for this pursuit, because he just was a fount of knowledge in areas that I didn't understand. And what we came to appreciate is that I had an intuitive idea that flowers were antennas. I mean, it doesn't take much of a imagination to look at this one here, golden seal, for example. Or let's look at, let me just jump, if I can, I want to show, look at this. This is a receiving dish. And so what we pointed out with the science in the Floral Hand of God book is code frequencies through light, through photonic transfer, is coming into the petals of the flower, is held in the semi-crystalline matrix of the water, and through my process, which surrounds the flowers with water, that code is captured. But it's captured without any human intervention, and it's no technology involved. It is completely ultra ancient, low technology that produces the most sophisticated outcome. And that's why I get so excited about it. And we can measure it. We can actually, through energy psychology, we can find what a person's limiting beliefs are. For example, they can state, I'm free from emotional trauma. We can find out with proper testing that that is not true. They are not free from trauma. We can administer this substance, which is one of the greatest ones, to relieve and remove the cumulative stressors. And then we can retest them, and that's all real time. I mean, that can occur in 2 minutes. I have videos. I may show a little 3-minute clip I think it's nice. And we can see if that quantum set of frequencies displaced the trauma. Now, we've watched that for 20 years. When I first did it, it was hard to believe. So I sent it out to a group of colleagues, of actually some of which are in the UK. And they found the same thing, that it can instantaneously, probably even possibly greater than light speed, superluminal speeds is what we call it. They can displace this stored trauma, and it's quite remarkable. So let's go and look at.
Yeah, I used blue-eyed grass myself, and I found it quite helpful. It was the first of the essences that I got to try.
Yeah.
And I'd had some very deep, let's say, regrets with my mother, and then I visited her after trying. And it did make a huge difference in my relationship, I've noticed, when I went about a month ago after having been angry for so long. Literally, I didn't have to pretend to kind of get over what I was feeling from having been raised, let's say, the way that, we all have our emotional traumas when we're younger. And it did allow me to actually forgive her. And I'm sure the flowers had an effect. So I just wanted to share my little story there.
Yeah, that's a thank you for sharing that. And it is so common to have that experience. We'll go down to the bottom of the site. There's this little thing that says community. So you can click on that link. And here it is. Here's my farm. This land was acquired in 1993. I came from Los Angeles, and the book describes that odyssey. The absolute unlikely way in Los Angeles that I found this place in the third least populated county in the state of Tennessee. And because of that low population density, we have these gorgeous places in nature. So I was guided to this and began practice, gave up my practice as I was developing, and then started practice again in 1999. So for many years, my primary focus was kind of keeping this functioning, but clinical work. And then, as things would have it, I got the guidance. I needed to stop that clinical work temporarily and come out a year and a half ago and absolutely full force get this place in shape. So we built two little structures here. They're both actually now occupied. Lorenzo came and stayed with in one of them recently, which was wonderful. And another gentleman is coming to stay here. And we're going to, at the upper portion of this, which is a long road on a hilltop, we're going to see how we can develop building plots so that people can eventually come in and put up housing. But it's really, it's going to require absolutely the right individuals, because that's why I want people to read the book. And I want people to look at this, because there has to be this deep internal sense that it's the right thing to do. And then I think if people are coming from abroad, we have to have a place for them to stay to see if it is compatible before they take steps to become more permanent members. So, Sir Julian, I think you know this from all the work that you've done. This is a large, large undertaking, because you can't have the wrong people there.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Whatever one tries to come up with, one is sometimes fooled, and that's the nature of the world we live in, because the people are clever at disguising themselves. People that really want things and have high ambitions, quite often very, very clever at disguising that. They bury it behind what is on the surface looking like a nice, sensible, and even quite likely hard-working person. And you find out 2 or 3 years later, actually sometimes less than that, sometimes within 6 months to a year,
right.
that they aren't.
Right.
Now, I've had a number of people working on my estate who, on my farm, because I started organic farming in 1975. I was the fourth official organic farmer in England. And in the early days, I was looking for support from people who were going to help me build up this practical, thriving enterprise that I had in my mind. And I had to offer them a cottage, because you can't really have people working the land who don't live there, especially when you have livestock, which I had livestock, a herd of Guernsey cows selling unpasteurized milk locally, chickens, sheep, pigs. And I had 2 people within the first 3 years who let me down, but they wouldn't leave the cottage. They didn't like the work, but they liked the cottage. And, you know, this is a hard lesson, because I had to spend a very large amount of money to get them out of that cottage. I didn't have enough money to spend on that particular regime. I wanted to use my money to build up my enterprise.
Yes.
So, you know, it's a hard lesson to learn, but the reality is you're completely correct. One simply does need to know that people feel right. You feel right with them. They feel right with you. They recognize that they will work hard. And I think it's not popular, the concept of working hard, amongst a great deal of people today, especially young people. They don't believe you have to. They think food comes from supermarkets. Whatever happens before then, they don't really know about, and they don't care.
Right.
Oh, they like it. They'd like it if it's not spread.
Yeah. Well, at some
they understand.
At some point,
this is poison.
Some point, I know I could spend hours, and I will start to travel again soon. I hope I can visit your place, because I would love to just see it and experience it. And that brings up something. It's a very, very, very important point that came out of the research that Dr. Tiller did in his laboratory. We were trying to look at what these frequencies that are downloaded into flowers that come into a bottle, how could we look at them in a laboratory? And he did a brilliant experiment that only he was able to do. Actually, his principal graduate student of 40 years before actually did this study. They put one of our powerful essences into a chamber that was extremely carefully controlled for the standpoint of measurement, pH, temperature change, various things that enabled them to, it's very complicated in physics, but it enabled them to measure what's called changes in gauge state. And for physicists, they know what gauge states are, but most people don't know. But gauge states are a way of looking at the totality of a space, and even multidimensionally, what's going on there. And so they put this essence in there with a very complicated monitoring apparatus. And over 3 weeks, and this is in the book, I don't want to take the time now to try and find it, but it's very, very interesting. They found that this substance sitting just in this controlled, closed space started to emit a very coherent frequency, which changed the entire space. And that emanating from the bottle. So what that brought up was Dr. Tiller's longstanding experimentation to show something called space conditioning. This was known to the ancients, as certainly for anyone that's been in Chartres Cathedral, if you sit there quietly, you feel this unbelievable resonance in Chartres and in so many places around the world. And that's coming, in the case of Chartres, from the amazing sacred geometry that was used to do that. But flowers and nature itself has a great deal of sacred geometry. So the reason for mentioning that is this place since 1993 has had a great many blessings heaped upon it. And for the people that walk there, they realize that this 160-acre forest, principally it's a forest with 7 acres of opening, it is space conditioned.
Yeah,
it is not a normal place.
I had some beautiful dreams there.
And I'm sure that must be true, Sir Julian. It must be true with your place too, that you've got places that are specially conditioned.
Yes, I think that must be right. And there are these sort of vortex energy centers, obviously, all over the world. And quite often I'm thinking back many generations to think why someone, but what I inherited actually is a very old little Elizabethan house. It's 500 years old. And my family weren't there at that time. My family have been there since the late 1900s. It's been in my family for about 150 years. But when you look at the predecessors and the predecessors and predecessors, it goes back to about the 14th century. And of course, there's nothing unusual about that in England. But the interesting thing is, you can see why they chose this particular spot. When they constructed and used architecture, they did it in order to facilitate this energy factor that you're describing. For instance, on a very simple sort of level, since there were no fridges or freezers, you always had your food storage area in the north-facing side of the house, called a larder in England, with a breeze block to let in cool air. You put your breakfast room usually in the east-southeast position. So when you came down to have your breakfast in the morning, you got the morning sun penetrating to give you a very good feeling about the start of the day, and so on and so on and so on, and where you drew the water from and all the rest of it. So you see, in those days, people were able to choose a site and design a homestead, as you would call it, accordingly. And I think what you're describing is very similar. And the point, I think, is, and it's connected up with your talking about need to create a parallel society, because unfortunately, reality is that the level of unawareness is still far too high on the planet. And to be able to get into the level of subtlety requires a level of awareness and spiritual evolvement, you might say, that makes it possible for you to feel and to sense this quantum level. If you can't and you don't, then you don't pick up on the very things which are the key issues in enabling you, quite possibly, to make use of or to work with the energy that exists there. So in modern society, they bulldozed out any such connection, apart from on the few places left, and there are, that are protected, actually, usually because they have a landscape feature, which is considered very valuable. They're not necessarily going into the subtle plane, but they're going to a semi-subtle plane. And the places that have been preserved, you will find occasionally, yes, it's still there. So we have to capture it and preserve it. Now, I found it fascinating what you were describing with the plants and with the flowers, and how you don't cut them. You put the essence of water around them, and their energy transmutes into water. And of course, we humans are 77% water. The water is the receiver of energy, if you like. It plays from the sun and from the moon, and so much of our lives is about the way water is reacting and working. So I thought this is a very unusual, very exceptional approach. You're not cutting and taking, you're taking in situ the energy that exists and manifesting out of plants. Particular flowers, which you discovered, have the highest energy levels. I go to homeopathic, and I also do acupuncture and follow other alternative health formulas. And I've recognized more and more how the vibrational level that is achieved once you allow yourself to relax into the recognition of your oneness with all that is in life, including the therapies, which are designed to very subtly stimulate your blood flow to free you from toxins, etc., etc. I see it all so connected up, and then you get to the land. And that's the place where we ought to be, as you quite correctly say, there ought to be a community of people who recognize the significance of this, who become permanent members, who work and who enhance.
That's why, in a sense, it may sound funny, but I was going to produce a little image, but I didn't have time. But I'll try and recreate it right here. A screening tool is my book. If people read that book, which is really an autobiography in a way, and it's a description of how the completely unlikely ability to find these things under great hardship around the world, how that could happen,
yes,
that's explained in the book. And if people don't understand that right away, that's a screening tool.
So
they don't get it.
You're the vector who picks up
Yeah.
that vibration from very specific plants, are you? Or are there others working with you that have this capacity?
No, it's actually funny enough. What I try to say is, for some reason, I got tapped on the shoulder. I'm trained, I'm a reasonably smart person, but no one could ever figure this out. It doesn't matter how smart you are. These things were seen by the higher guidance, yes, whoever that committee is. And they saw 20 years in advance, well, I'm sure far before that, but they saw the challenges that were going to hit people. And that's why I want people to look at these that were called test phrases. So the test phrase on this flower, which comes from a sacred lake at about 14,000 feet in the Andes in Peru. It was the first flower that a shaman showed me. And when you do a test with your patient, the phrase is, I allow myself to receive love. I did that in the early 2000s. I went at a conference of holistic nurses, right? There were hundreds of them there. And I screened many of the nurses. And about 80% of the nurses did not allow themselves to receive love. They gave love. They gave love, but they didn't receive love. And if you do that long enough, you will become ill, because it is extremely important to receive love. So this little flower growing above this particular lake, which is the shaman told me that was the most powerful area to collect this flower. And so I did that. I collected the frequencies in water, which is then held permanently. It doesn't lose its potency over time. And so this is one of the great flowers that appears in several of our let's look at this. Healing support is another extraordinary one. Now this shows where I am in the Andes. That's me going up around this whole thing to another sacred lake there. And so these things were all guided over many, many years to find these flowers in the most unusual locations. Also in Bali and in the outer islands of the Philippines, around, and then in the United States, in the area near Telluride, Colorado, which has these extraordinary mountains. So, let's see, going back, I think what we've seen now, I've started to come out and speak about this. We're getting in international inquiries. And if people should want these things from the UK, they need to contact us we can do staff at floralive.com, and if they have questions to me about the community, it's Doc Davis at floralive.com. And we would get back to them, and then we would send them instructions on how to order, because we have a distributor on the continent that can ship to UK, I think. And we've had several inquiries, and the great problem is normal mail from here costs as much as the remedies do, so, or even more. So we're trying to get, hopefully someday we'll have a UK distributor, but we can do that temporarily. And I really hope that this gets to just the right people who say we're going to come. So one of the things I started a project in February, March, this last spring. And the vision was try to look at a model to prove by the end of summer if my idea is correct. So what I did, here we are planting the last, this is a roll, we'll make 280 of the dryland rice. And that will almost be enough for the family this year. So what an honor to be able to carry on this tradition of planting food for our family, and rice that sustains so much of the world. A lot of people don't know that it grows quite well. We grew it last year, and this year will be much better. So I'll be seeing patients this afternoon, it's not efficient, but it's marvelous. It's wonderful. It's not efficient in terms of cost, but in terms of connection with the earth and satisfaction, it's over the top. So what a privilege to be able to do this on our own land, and we want to have other people share in this. And there's enough fear for many families, and so it's all built on this infrastructure that we created. So we look forward to having others work with us. Yeah, so that's just an example. We have springs right out of the ground that deliver water to the side of our house. You simply hold out a glass and there's your water. And it's a remarkable place. We're going to try to get the fertility of the soil high enough so that we can go to completely no-till planting. We can't yet, but we use spaders. Now spaders, here's a little one, and then I have a big one on the back of that little Kubota tractor there. It's an IMAT spader. Those are made in the Netherlands. And they're wonderful things that are like double digging. They shift the soil, but they don't invert the soil layer.
Yeah.
So we try not to disturb the microbial balance. And so you can imagine this poor character here. I'm very tired after doing 24/7 off an 18-hour days. But so we did this starting in March, and now I just harvested and dried our peanuts. And what I have found, or the experiment was, so what if, in this strange era that could be coming upon us, the nutritional supplements, and mind you, I've been selling these for many, many years, are critical for people. But what if the nutritional supplements disappear? What if our high-quality protein powder disappears? So, and protein is very, very important. So I thought, well, what if we combine hemp hearts and peanuts and hull-less hull-less pumpkins, which were originally bred in Austria. And so I did that. And it forms a magnificent, complete protein. And so we grew 5 acres of hemp. Unfortunately, in 2018, that's way too much hemp because you can't deal with all the volume. The hand harvesting and drying is unreasonable. So if we get a chance, Julian, later, you connect with me and let me know your experience with nutritional hemp, which is wonderful for animal feed, and it's fantastic for chickens. The nutrient value of the eggs increases, the laying capacity increases with hemp. And I want to grow edible hemp. We grew CBD hemp. We grew the hemp that has CBD in it, but I want to grow hemp for consumption, human consumption as a nutrient. And the extraordinary two tablespoons, 28 grams of hemp hearts have 10 grams of protein. There is no other food like that. So we're excited because that's part of this project. So the pumpkin seeds were magnificent. The peanuts are great, except for how the heck do you process? If you grow it, you have to grow quite a bit of it. You have to grow an acre of it or so. And the labor involved in separating it from the plant, we found a remarkable, I'll share this for anybody that wants to do this. You simply align your peanuts all in a row and let them sun dry. And then when they're dry, you feed them into the spokes of a bicycle. This is astonishing. This is done in India. We found a video on YouTube of this little fellow surrounded by mountains of peanuts. He was just feeding them into the spokes of the bicycle, and it knocks them off.
Right.
And then they're there, which takes it's a long time by hand to do this. But he did it very rapidly with low technology. And then if you can bring yourself to possibly get a deshelling apparatus from China, they're selling them now very inexpensively. You can then shell these things, and you've got a quantity, you've got kilos and kilos of very high quality peanuts, which curiously as a health practitioner, you see many people with bad peanut allergy. And actually, an early study in the 80s showed that many of so-called peanut allergies are actually from aflatoxin from bad storage practices of the peanuts. So when you don't have aflatoxin on your peanuts, a lot of people are not allergic to them. I used to have bad peanut allergies, and I love these peanuts. They don't cause me any problems. Yeah. So anyway, there's a long story, but it's the idea of these remarkable products that cause transformation in society, 20 of which, by the way, come from the forest. 20 of the flowers in the Flor Alive offering come from various places on this land. And so people can work here. We have to grow in order to support more individuals. But the piece that will produce when I edit this in another month or so, there will be a video showing the steps of this process, showing the enormity of what is involved when you go to clear and maintain land. Yeah. And I want people that are thinking of just running off and rapidly creating a homestead to think twice, because they either have to be fabulously wealthy or they're going to fail.
Yes.
They have to have an enormous ability to bring in workers, which is getting to be harder and harder. Yes, so I think it's very important to find operating facilities, operating places, support them, help them grow. And that is where people can find a livelihood in housing, because to do it on your own is very tough. And so the theme of this little video will be Flor Alive has started out with the impossible. So my vision in 2000, which is explained in the book, was unlikely and impossible.
So you have this, have this tension which is existing between commercial and self-sufficiency. And this is actually a very real thing. It isn't simply a question of ideology. It's a question of when you're doing it, how much can you afford to do purely self-sufficient? Or how much do you have to sell in order to be able to recoup enough income to be able to reinvest and to have a small amount of money to be able to make your life reasonable, so to speak? And then the second element of this question, this is the one that I'm particularly involved in, or have been on my farm, is you should try always to sell what is high quality fresh food locally. You shouldn't go to a big global or even national marketplace. You should sell locally, because that's how the food is supposed to be eaten. It's supposed to be eaten fresh within 1 or 2 days of being taken out of the soil, ideally, and locally. And that also means that local people can become attuned to the farm. They can have an interaction with the farm, not just the farmer selling off the farm.
Right.
This is a very difficult balance to achieve.
Yes.
And I've been working at it, for 40 or so years. Yeah. And I've had ups and downs and ups and downs and ups and downs with it. And I'm only gradually getting to the point where I can foresee that we can supply we're fortunate in where my farm is, that we're surrounded by population centres. In one way, it's unfortunate because it's a crowded area of the southeast of England, one of the most densely populated areas of Europe. But it has the advantage that amongst the mix of people who live there will be some who definitely want to take high quality, real organic food, and who are willing to pay a little bit more possibly for it.
Right.
Because unfortunately, the reality has been, at least to start with, because we're pioneers, that you had to charge a little bit more, because economies of scale, you're producing things on a very small scale, and you're buying in a certain amount from outside, including seed, at least initially. When you buy in bulk, you get 20 or 30% off. When you're buying in tiny volumes, you don't. Right. So you're up against all the things that the commercial farmer has in his favor. You don't have.
Well,
and to get the balance right is difficult, is it not?
It truly is. But we feel very, very blessed for this 20 years of building this brand, which has been largely unknown, but that is changing now, the Flor Alive brand, that we have that as a support structure, because I've gone all over the world. Those essences, which are unique. I mean, there are many flower essences, but when you read the book, you realize what's so unusual about that patented process and the extraordinary places. So they are a premium priced product, as they should be. And that does help support the people that would be working here. So what I was saying was that the 20 years we do look back, it started out with an impossible vision and a dream. And then it became probable, and then it became manifest. So that is how it proceeded, and that's going to be the point of view for populating our community. And I'm going to publish something that is absurd, and that is exactly who we're looking for.
Right.
There will be six to eight descriptions, such as someone that's a highly conscious mechanic, someone that really understands machinery,
yes,
someone that is a phenomenally effective body worker and would love to care for everyone.
Yeah.
Someone that is a genius and a marvelous mother, could be a father, but that has mastered home education, homeschooling. As someone that is a master chef that would love to cook for everyone. I'm going to delineate who we're looking for in the world.
Yeah. Now
tell me this,
wait
for them to
Brent,
show up.
I'd like to know this, because it's up at that point. Those people, maybe those people will be able, are earning their income outside or have enough income to be able to work voluntarily. Is that
right?
Correct?
Is that what?
Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah. I mean,
so in other words, they don't have to earn their living through working.
No, not
land. They have a private income.
That's right. That's right. So what we're looking at is how there are several models, and I've gone to 2 or 3 workshops in the last year. I'm not alone. I mean, there are people trying to figure out how to form homesteads. Okay.
Yeah. So
the first thing that happens with somebody, let's say somebody is financially independent. They say, "Oh, it looks like you have a great place. We got the money. How do we, how do we buy in?" So the problem becomes, and in your, I think I read that it's 900 acres. Your family.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
That's magnificent. Ours is 160 acres. It's a lot smaller, but that's still a lot of land. It is. And they're going to want, well, I want to buy 20 acres. No, you can't do that. So that's where I think you've taken this point of view. We have to create a trust, and the people have the ability to build on that, own it, and sell it.
Right.
But they never own the land. They never own the land. And that is a model which a few places that I have found are putting into place. Because as long as people are advised and understand their rights and that they won't lose money, I think that's the model that will follow.
Yes. Yes. No, that's extremely significant. I mean, land never probably should have been owned in the first place. If you read philosophical texts about ownership, land is one of the things that always ought to be shared. However, we're way down the line from this, but to get back to a situation where people recognize the land as a common resource for a number of people to share, the place where you live, your home, your small home, whatever it might be, maybe it is a place which you could own. You might buy that place eventually. But to start with, I think, you rent it. That's what we do. We rent the cottage.
Yeah.
And the people make a contribution by renting, because after all, you've got to maintain them.
Right. I think that's what we're going to do. Lorenzo, when he was visiting, he had an idea, which was wonderful. And we're going to pursue that into a new form of low-cost housing. And I'm going to try to put up at least 1 or 2 more of these. And hopefully one that I envision has like a community center in the kitchen and then 4 little apartments. I would love that. And then people can come in and pay rent. And after staying there 6 months or a year, everybody would know, should they get one of those building pads or not?
Yeah.
Right.
Now, what about the sense? Do you envision a sort of communal eating? For instance, having a meal which everyone shares during the day?
Yeah.
Or do you see people providing for themselves and cooking and eating their own food in their home?
I see both. Let me tell you something funny.
Both,
I grew up in California, Southern California, and for a very special part of my life was between the ages of 19 and 38. For 19 years, we lived strangely on a street where one by one houses became available to this very tightly knit little group of friends.
Right.
So we had people renting 5 houses on the same street. It wasn't a commune.
No.
But each of us one night, for the other 7 people, each of us one night cooked a magnificent gourmet dinner. So we had to cook once a week. And everyone came over that evening if they were free. If they weren't free or had a date, or we were youngsters, younger folks, then their portion of dinner was saved for them and they had a wonderful lunch for a couple of days. Yeah. So that's the kind of thing we envision. It certainly is not a commune, but it should be communal.
Yes, I agree with that, actually. It's a very nice process. Yeah. I worked on a kibbutz in Israel, something which, of course, is difficult to talk about at this particular point in time because of the horrors that are going on over there. But I worked as a volunteer right back when I first started converting my farm in 1975. I wanted to understand how this type of community was established and how it works, because a kibbutz and a similar version to a kibbutz, which has the factor that people own the house they live in, but they share the land. But the kibbutz is actually not like that. You don't own the cottage or the house you live in, nor do you own the land. You share everything. Now, they have communal meals every day. You have your breakfast and your main meal and your evening meal communally. And you go out and work on the land, and you come back and you have your evening meal. And the way that the community gets to know each other is very much centered around the eating.
Well,
it's quite interesting. And historically, of course, this is the way poor countries all over the world have maintained a social momentum and cultural momentum, because they share the food. Yeah. And the food, if they've been involved in growing the food, it's even better, isn't it?
Yeah. We learn, I'm sure you've done this, sounds from your travels, but we learn so much from seeing other people, especially third world. I jokingly say with pride, I have built a wonderful third world operation in the first world, and I'm very proud of that. Because I appreciate it. And when I was not long ago, a few years ago, I did some studies in Central America, and I was with a tribal group in the Panama jungle. And they took me to the Longhouse and showed me where they had their Wednesday night meetings. And there were 3 elders there, and the whole community showed up. And guess what? That was true democracy.
Yes.
They actually voiced anything that was a concern for themselves individually or for the community, and it was spoken out loud in the Longhouse. And then there was a discussion, and there was a solution every week.
Well, I do believe that, and I think this is very, very to the point also. I mean, I've written about this quite extensively, both in my books and essays, that the democratic experiment is finished on the planet. I think we've seen, actually, that it's a failure. Now, it filled in an important gap after, monarchy was dictatorship. So that couldn't go on forever. Now, democracy appeared to be something different, where people had a really opportunity to have a say in who they elected to run the country or run the locality for them. But the problem is that people didn't care after having elected what these people did when they were in office. They just wanted them to look after them, the people, so that they could go off and party and work and pay no attention to. So that's why democracy's failed. It's like hiring babysitters.
Well, it is.
So that's where we are. So it's been supplanted. The tribal element is within the tribe, it was the elder, the wise elder, who was the leader within that organization. And he was respected, or she was respected for that. And indeed, the wise elders, you might say, it doesn't have to be a single individual, obviously. And it can be both sexes, quite obviously. So within a modern context, I think we're going to have to get back to that.
Well, and I think there must be a specific program to recruit the young, wherever they are.
Yes.
Let's call them the 20-something, the lost generation. Because
yes.
These folks, there's a funny term, I never knew it until I had one of them come to work for me. They're called snowflakes. There's a common, the snowflake falls and then it melts and it's gone. And that's what happens to the motivation of these young people.
Yes.
A tremendous amount of entitlement. And they don't understand hard work. I had to wait until I was 68 years old to have my first child.
Wow.
And that was a picture of him on there holding his little glass up. So now he's 4 years old. And so it's an extraordinary time.
Yes.
To see, and I want more of that young energy on our place. So the first people that moved there, has been an organic farmer. He just recently took extensive soil samples all over our farm. We're sending it out, which in the next 2 weeks we're going to do. He said it will be a one-time infusion of nutrients, micronutrients, and so on into the soil. And then beyond that, we will build it organically, just with green cropping and so on. So he is a very white Anglo guy, lived in India for 7 years, has a lovely Indian wife. And so he and his Indian wife and his 3 adorable children are our first residents.
Wonderful. Now that is tremendous. I like it very much. I like the feeling.
Yeah, and so and they were commenting on the benefits of, in her case, she was educated, well educated, but her background and her farming background in India was third world.
Of course it is. Of course it is. Yeah. They have, I think the average size for a farm in India is about 1/4 of an acre, and there are 800 million farmers. Yes, I've been a couple of times. I have quite a few colleagues out there still. No, this is correct. This is very good thinking. And the point is, the therapy, aside from your essences, the therapy factor comes from working the land, getting your hands in the earth, in all weathers, I would even say. And learning the endless amount that you have to learn. And you're learning everything every year, you're learning something new. And you sort of give yourself up to this. It's you give yourself up to the divine and say, look, I'm in your hands. Please support what I'm doing, because I'm trying to do the best for you. And that brings together people who are humble. And this is an important factor. You need humble people who recognize the fact that we have a shared planet. We really shouldn't need more than a very small amount of land each. I mean, I happen to have inherited 900 acres of land, of which half is forestry, incidentally. And the other half, which is farmed, is very poor soil, extremely stony and very thin, extremely difficult. Most of it you can't even create arable on. It's permanent pasture. It's only suitable for grazing. But there are parts of it which are reasonably fertile, what we call in England grade 3 and 4 land. And those where we are working according to it, particularly the vegetable growing area, which is about 20 acres, 25 acres now, which is now without any farmyard manures, and it's entirely green manure based cropping. Now, when that experiment started, I was a bit worried, because I thought, I'm giving someone here the opportunity to do this, and he's convincing me that it's going to be okay, and we're not going to lose nutrients, and that I'll see the results, and I hopefully will be pleased with them. And I was very pleased. I am extremely pleased. Year after year after year, it has improved. Now, we do bring in some green matter from outside, which are hedge clippings and bits of branches of trees and things that the local council are clearing, and we break them right down and compost them. And then the compost is spread on the land. And that adds one extra dimension to make it not entirely self-sufficient. But the key element, I think, is to be able to show that it's not essential to have livestock, farmyard manure. It's a good thing in many cases on poor land, but on other land which is not so poor, it's not necessary.
Right.
So, that's a huge issue.
And that we are taking that approach. Absolutely. We only have probably about 5 acres that's open, but again, well used, that can produce a great deal. And so it's we planted this Sudan grass, the what's it called? It's a particular kind of Sudan grass, and it produced this massive. It was growing when you were here, right? Or did you see it?
Yeah,
Lorenzo?
It looked like corn. Looks somewhat like corn. Yeah, when it's growing.
Yeah, it's corn. It's very large.
Yes,
and it produces a tremendous amount of biomass, and then now it's all been turned in.
Yes, that's right. Well, that's the thing, isn't it? It's turning in biomass, and there are many different forms that you can do this with. Starting off with just basic clovers and things like this. Right. Things that fix nitrogen, all the pulse family, for instance, they can all be used to then be turned in, and they'll give you extra nitrogen because you don't need to put on nitrogen from the bag. And of course, that's the first lesson in organic farming to learn, that you don't need to do that. And that's a hard one for conventional farmers to understand until they actually do it. But where I am at the moment, which is in Poland, because I'm the president of the International Association to Protect the Polish Countryside. My wife is Polish. We have 1.5 hectares of land here. And that's a scale which I'm much more suited to, frankly, than 900. Right. And we grow 80% of our own vegetables. We're 80% self-sufficient. We have clay straw house barn where we have a center for learning and teaching people and meetings. We have quite a lot of clean energy system working quite well for the house. We have photovoltaic panels, etc. So we're sort of trying to go off grid.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And this experiment is where you really get closer to the ground. At my land in Hardwick, I was overseeing an operation which is complex because it involves a number of different small units, renting different amounts of land or buildings, and doing complementary, as you saw from the website, doing complementary activities. Some of them humanitarian, some of them to do with health. We have also we're growing hemp on about 30 acres every year now, and we have people specifically devoted to that who make their living from it, and they make their living from processing the flowers and making CBC products and selling. So we have a whole series of small industries. You can do that when you have 900 acres and 30 cottages, which we have on the. And all these cottages are over 400 years old.
Oh my!
And they cost a lot of money to repair when they go wrong.
Yeah,
so you have to make this thing into an economically viable thing, aside from one which is organically viable. It has to be economically viable.
There's a great challenge to maintaining this ideal and still coming up with the revenue. So yeah, we're working on it. We're working on it, and I'm so glad to be connected, and please do connect with me offline, because I want to know your experience with your hemp.
Yes.
That you've grown. We know all about the CBD stuff because we grew it, but I'm really wanting to understand some strains that we grew originally from Italy that look like they were very good for food production.
Yes, there's a lot going on around hemp. It's being, well, as I'm sure know much more about it than I do, it's being held up now as an extraordinarily important curative agent, as well as a nutritional agent, as well as when you get into the stems of the hemp plant, etc., you're getting into building materials with hugely advantageous characteristics by comparison to using standard wood or brick or whatever. So it is a massively important place. It's hardly surprising that the powers that be that run the planet at the moment are making it hellishly difficult for people to get a license to grow it. You can understand why. It's too revolutionary.
That's it.
It's quite difficult to manage. It's quite difficult to harvest. You have to set the combine harvester's cutter board quite high, and in order to collect the seeds and everything properly, you have to learn how to do this. So it's not for everybody to jump in. Just as you were saying, you have to be very thoughtful about how you approach this. Take it slowly. Do a small acreage to start with. Learn the problems associated with it, and once you're confident, go into a larger scale.
Right. Well, I think for our little place, we'll still be doing largely hand processing because we don't.
Yes, it's very nice that. So it should be.
We want to do it for small amount of livestock and for ourselves, not to produce it, because you have to have, like, for instance, here there are some special hemp combines, and they start at $500,000.
That's the trouble. Just we use the bog standard combine harvest. It costs about £1,500. Yes, that's all we can afford, and you can adapt them. Right. But that's what I mean. It's a bit tricky.
Yes.
So yeah, indeed. I think it's a wonderful experiment, and the point I think it's worth making from the point of view of people who are watching or viewing this is that in my experience, and increasingly working with Jadwiga, my wife, who's very knowledgeable, much more knowledgeable than I am about plant life, all plants offer some form of curative element. That's why they're there. Yeah. They're there to support us and other animal kingdom, of course.
Yeah.
And they all have their different vibrational value. You happen to be going for the ones that have the extremely high vibrational level for a particular need, etc., etc. But once you start living somewhere and you have a small garden and you see what's growing there, you don't try and maintain these dreadful crew-cut lawns that you see in suburbia, where there's nothing left naturally. You may as well have an astroturf garden, frankly. But once you let some stuff grow in those things, you see what is growing there, and you realize that you can eat it, or you can make tea with it, or you can use it to make a tincture out of it, or you can put it over a cup when you've cut your hair. They've all got this. But we have to learn. It's like going back to being a child. You have to almost relearn from scratch.
So here's a little, maybe a closing story. I just wish and hopefully we'll continue more conversations. My little boy, our neighbors are Mennonite, close to Amish, and that is one of the one of the great blessings, because we've learned a great deal.
Yes.
In the early years, all of our cultivation was done with horse-drawn cultivation. So we lived, and that was the blessing of finding this place. And so our little boy is often with them, and he doesn't wear shoes. I mean, he just does. If you put him in shoes, he takes his shoes off. So he runs around, and we got our new the child that I mentioned just became our first residence. We saw him running. He's 2 years older than my little boy. He's 7, and he's running down the road. He says, "Your boy." He's hurt. Well, I didn't know how badly he's bleeding. Oh my goodness. So I stopped it right here, and I shot back up to find the 9-year-old daughter with my little boy, had his leg up, and she was looking at me, and she had a little green leaf on his foot. And she said, "And I hope it's okay. I've put plantain on this."
Oh my goodness.
And I said, "You've done well. Your father showed you just what to do, and you went out and found the plantain." So we pulled it off, and there was no bleeding. And she was 9 years old, and she knew enough. She ran out until she found plantain, came back, and as it turns out, it was a small injury. But what a wonderful story.
No, that's really what it's all about. Now, if we could be educating our children in that sort of environment, where that knowledge became more important than the stuff they stuff into people's heads in schools, we would be moving towards this new society that we dream about. It would be the baseline, actually. I'm always saying that agriculture, that farming is the sounding bell for how your society is, basically, how healthy or how not healthy it is. You have to start from there. Everything should start.
And undoubtedly, you're familiar with the anthroposophical, the model.
Yes, I am.
Appropriate agriculture, biodynamics. Appropriate education, Waldorf, God rest Stein.
Yes,
the journey to
yes,
great
yes,
with what's happened with Waldorf
yeah,
lately.
yeah,
And then positive medicine, agriculture, it's all there. That was a
yes,
beautiful
yes. That's exactly it.
threefold.
Well, it's been a pleasure talking to you. I also have to
Yes,
wrap
well,
up actually because I think we've had about an hour probably, but it's
We
been
have.
extremely interesting, and
wonderful.
I'm delighted to have made your acquaintance.
Thank you, sir. So much. A pleasure.
Yeah.
By the
Ju-
way, I'm inherited my title. I didn't earn it, so
But that's,
I wasn't
I
given a title
believe
for being an organic farmer.
I'd accept any of that stuff. You give me a bunch of wonderful
I
land,
don't
I'll
use
take
it
it.
very much either, to tell you the truth.
well,
But I don't
Well, that's
mind when other people like to use it, so it doesn't bother me.
oh sure.
well,
Honestly,
Julian,
long history.
thank you so much for joining us,
Okay.
Julian. I really appreciate it. Next time I'll get the hour earlier, so maybe we'll have a chance for a longer talk. And it seems like Brent and yourself and myself would be happy to continue this on. Perhaps when we get some time together, do a part 2 or part 3, because it seemed we barely touched base on a lot of the important topics that could be expanded upon.
Yes.
Very good.
All right. Thank you, Julian. Thank you, Brent.
Wonderful.
And I hope to see you again very soon. And thank you all for joining us. I love you all very much. Questions, suggestions will be below. Brent will send me the contact if you want to get orders in UU. North America, we'll leave contact below. I'll leave Julian's link, of course, below for his book. Don't forget the changing course, of changing. Julian, what's the name of your book again?
Yes, Overcoming the Robotic Mind, Why Humanity Must Come Through is the title of my most recent book. Yeah.
Right. So we'll leave a link to that as well, and a link to Brent's book. And if anyone has any questions or suggestions, I'll pass them along. Thank you all for joining us. I love you all very much. Until next time, see you soon.
Light of my heart. No one tells me where I should start. Freedom first is what I say.